If you've been looking for a subsidized home, you definitely don't want to miss the upcoming SBF or Sale of Balance Flats launch in February 2026. Usually, HDB only holds an SBF exercise once per year, which makes every launch a pretty big deal. We actually got quite lucky in 2025 because HDB surprised everyone with a bonus second launch in July, but that was a rare exception. In theory, it is strictly an annual thing. So, if you miss this February window, you will likely have to wait for another whole year before the next SBF comes around. When it comes to price, realistically, SBF is somewhere in the middle. It is true that they are generally more expensive than BTO flats because prices are adjusted to the current market conditions and the flats are closer to being completed, or in some cases, it's even already completed if it's a repurchase flat from HDB. However, they are still quite cheaper than buying from the resale market. You're basically getting a subsidized home from HDB without having to pay the high prices that private sellers ask on the open market. And the best part about SBF is the shorter waiting time. Since these are balanced units from previous launches or repurchase flats, many of them are already built or very close to finishing or even ready to move in. This means you could be collecting your keys and moving in much faster than if you waited years for a BTO to be built from scratch. With about 3,000 units expected to be available this February, it's a golden chance to get a home quickly. Just make sure your HFE or HDB flat eligibility letter is ready so you can jump in once the application period is open. Now let's talk about how you can apply for SBF. Before we talk about how to apply, let's first discuss what is the criteria to purchase a flat via SBF. First of all, you'll need to qualify for the flat under one of HDB's existing schemes: public scheme, fiancé scheme, or orphan scheme. The second criteria is that one of the applicants has to be Singaporean, so it cannot be a couple where both are PRs. You also must be at least 21 years old, and note that there's also an income ceiling requirement. For families, the maximum household income per month is $14,000, while for extended families, the ceiling is higher at $21,000 per month. There are also other criteria related to property ownerships where you and all other applicants or occupiers listed in the flat application don't own other property, whether overseas or locally. You also should not have disposed of any property within the last 30 months. You and all other applicants or occupiers listed in the flat application cannot invest in private residential property from the date of flat application till after the MOP or minimum occupation period. You also should not have bought a new HDB or DBSS flat or EC flat, or have received a CPF housing grant before, or you have only bought one of those properties prior and only received one CPF housing grant thus far. Assuming that you can meet the criteria that I'm mentioning, let's move on to the next topic, which is how to buy an SBF unit. Here is an overview of the SBF process. So this chart that HDB provided stated that the first step would be to wait for the sale announcement and apply for the flat online. But I would argue that there's a step 0 before that, which is to secure your HFE or HDB flat eligibility letter. This has replaced the previous HDB loan eligibility letter or HLE since May 2023. This letter will summarize your HDB flat eligibility, CPF housing grant eligibility, and HDB loan eligibility, as well as the amounts you can qualify for and can loan. Another key difference is you need to have a valid HFE letter upfront if you want to apply for the SBF launch. You can't just wing it on the fly because it can take up to 21 working days to process your HFE letter. The letter itself is valid for 9 months, so if you are thinking of buying a BTO or SBF, please apply for the HFE letter early in advance. If you want to know more details about applying for an HFE letter, click link in the description down below as I have discussed it in another video. The next step is to submit an online application within the application period. As each SBF launch only lasts around 1 week, you don't have much time to think, so we highly recommend you do your due diligence and pick which flat and location meet your needs. As buying a house is a long-term commitment, it would be good for you to visit the location if possible. Although the flat is still being built and you can't go inside, at least you can see the surroundings, amenities, etc. and make sure it's meeting your expectations. Following this, if your application is successful, you will be shortlisted via a computer ballot. The HDB SBF results are usually announced in about 1.5 months. If you are lucky to get a small queue number, then your chances of getting the flat that you want are much higher. This is when you will also need to pay for the option fee, which is $1,000 for a 3-room flat and $2,000 for a 4-room or bigger flat. If you are buying 2-room flexi flat, the option fee is $500. Also, you'll want to get your finances to purchase your flat. If you are taking out a bank loan, then you should also secure your in-principle approval or IPA. After you have booked your flat, you will be asked to sign the agreement for lease and to make the down payment. Depending on how you are choosing to finance your HDB flat and how much your flat costs, the down payment amount will be different. Once your home is completed, you will then be asked to collect your keys and make the full payment. For those eligible and opting for the staggered down payment scheme, you will pay your down payment in 2 parts. The first when you sign the agreement for lease, and the second when you collect the keys to your flat. For flats that are already built, you can sign the agreement for lease, make the full payment, and then get your keys. Okay, now let's get real. Is it true that SBF is basically selling leftover flats? Well, it's true to a certain extent. When you apply for a BTO flat, you are essentially trying to get the opportunity to choose the best flat out of the bunch, right? But when you apply for a flat under SBF, generally there are 2 scenarios. The first scenario is that these flats are considered undesirable. It could be that the unit is on a lower floor, or close to the centralized rubbish disposal, or the view is blocked, etc. But there is the other scenario where there's nothing wrong with the flat, but it's just on the market because the buyer's circumstances change. For example, they broke up, got divorced, cannot secure a mortgage loan, and many more. So there is still hope. However, there is one thing that you should remember. There are serious consequences if you got a queue number but didn't pick a flat, no matter how bad your queue number is. From August 2023 onwards, first-time home buyers who registered one non-selection will be considered a second-timer for a year. If after that you still decline to choose a flat, then you will be blocked from HDB sale exercise for a year. Most people think this applies to BTO only, but that's not true because this also applies to SBF process. This non-selection count will only be waived if there are only 10 flats or fewer to choose from in a BTO process, or there are only 5 flats or fewer in SBF process. So, I'd say only apply for SBF flats if you are willing to be flexible and not so picky. Another catch is SBF flat prices are typically higher versus if you buy from the BTO process because your waiting time is generally shorter. But it should still be cheaper compared to HDB resale flats. Plus, remember that you'll be getting a new flat. A popular question is, can you apply for BTO and SBF at the same time? The answer is no. You may only submit one application for one town and flat type in a sales launch. If the sale launch has both BTO and SBF exercise, then you can only apply for one but not both of them. If all of this talk about price and the queue number is depressing, to be fair, there are benefits in buying SBF flats. Besides, the waiting time is generally shorter. For SBF, you can have more details up to the block and unit number. This is different versus BTO, where you generally only get generic information such as location, map, type, and flat size. If you know the exact unit, then you can come down to the location to at least view the surroundings and its facing and ensure you are okay with it. If SBF is not for you, check out my other video on how to buy a resale flat without any agent. To support my work, you can give a one-time tip by pressing the thanks button, pick the amount that you want, and click buy and send. Or you can also press the join button for exclusive contents and monthly membership. Your support means a lot to keep us independent. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!